Power on.
First of all, tell us exactly how these drones work.
Basically, thank you for inviting me. So first of all, and then basically, the drone is actually working through its program. So basically, after you give it program, and then you will just follow its instructions and do flights autonomously. And then our company produces VTOL drone, like vertical takeoff and landing. So basically, it can take off anywhere, like in a small room, and then transit to like fixed wing mode, and then land it anywhere. So it's very flexible. So basically, that's how it works in terms of that. And then obviously, to fight with coronavirus, and then to help the government to do the quarantine, and then we actually contribute quite a lot in terms of various aspects, which I can detailedly describe in later terms. Yeah.
Right. So tell us a little bit about what these drones are capable of and how they can help.
Okay. So firstly, we can be equipped with optical zoom camera, which it can identify people congregation more efficiently. So especially in a large city area. So for example, usually the government, they don't have enough human resources to cover the ground. So basically they choose to use the drone technology. And with the VTOL fixed wing technology, it's easier to deploy and take off, and then monitor the major roads and the public spaces very quickly. And then if they spot any sort of congregation of people, for so many people getting around with each other, then they can alert the staff on the ground, and then they can take actions, or they take off measures to inform the public that not to be congregated or getting together. So this is one aspect, and then the other is that the drone can use the loudspeaker to replace the using of normally driving police cars around us, and then because the drone can fly basically more efficiently to everywhere, so it can carry the loudspeaker to broadcast the knowledge and the guidance for people to follow, and then to keep the people noticing, and then they should wear a mask, or they should not be so close to each other. Then they have to be sort of socially distanced. So that's something that it can replace the traditional way of broadcasting the guidance. And then
so what exactly have your orders been from the Chinese government, and are these drones in operation in other countries?
Basically, since the outbreak, we have been really sort of contributing ourselves, not only the order, but we also, help the government, or we also work with the government in terms of, helping them to, more efficiently do the quarantine and control of the people flow. So basically, it has been very successful since so far, and we still help them, and sometimes we do service for them as well. They already bought the drones, and then we have our pilots to help them to fly the drones and operate the drones, and then to give more certified results. After a certain period of time, after we adjust and improve our methods.
Right.
Yeah.
Accessing historical database. Year 2020. The tech giants become aware of the greatest threat to their corporatist domination. An obscure science and tech podcast becomes a major factor in a peaceful open source revolt against the military Silicon Valley industrial complex. The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. the tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
Woo! Here for your weekly dose of calm the fuck down. Well, no, maybe Sovryn Tech's never really been that. But regardless, ladies and gentlemen, Z's, of course, as I've said on recent Zomi 1 Underground only content, where we've covered more of what is, really what everybody's talking about these days, we live in very interesting times, and we are going to cover some of those interesting times in this episode. We'll get into some, well, it's all relative, right? But I think we're going to cover in this episode a couple of aspects, certainly one aspect or one potential solution that I am very worried is going to get bantied about a bit in the light of what's happening with COVID-19. Now, if you want to go somewhere where the discussion about COVID-19 and its, varying efficacy and concerns around it itself, the facts around the virus itself, this is not an episode that's really going to deep dive into that. But as far as what is being done about COVID-19 and what people are looking at as far as solutions to the spread of the virus, well, then you have come to the right place. And I think in a very real way, as many people are realizing, and as I had stated a couple episodes ago, it was the episode Have a Corona. I want to say it was episode 364, maybe it was 363 of Sovryn Tech, where I said the thing that everyone's going to have to deal with, and the thing that is going to affect people probably even more, or at least with more severity, is the economic concerns and the economic factors of COVID-19. Regardless, as I brought up over and over again in a recent Q&A, of course, if you want to sign up to get those, you go to zomia1.com and you can get your hookup there. Sign up for as low as $2 a month, though if you want to do more, I am honored. Just go to Zomia1, that's ZOMIAONE.com to get your hookup. As I discussed there, always keep in mind with this. Okay, we're going to get into the foreplay. We got a story of the week that I don't think you'll see coming. And we've got some very interesting things to talk about during HackSec, all very related to this, but it's a culmination also it's a confrontation and culmination of things we've talked about on Sovryn Tech. Okay, but as I said there, always bear in mind, there is not just one factor, one force involved with what is going on with COVID-19 right now. Okay. There are multiple forces, and I'm being very particular in how I am wording this. Pay very close attention to how I am wording this. There are multiple factors taking advantage of this situation. There are multiple forces taking advantage of this situation. Okay. Again, taking advantage of, that's what's really key here that you have to understand. Because when I say that, by wording it that way, I am not saying that COVID-19 is somehow fake or some horseshit like that. But COVID-19, okay, and its spread is very, very real. This is a very real thing. The economic factors that are being forced upon you, okay, and those actions are very real. You cannot avoid these, okay? But keep in mind that if you're listening to some other podcasts, I've been nothing less than disturbed by what a lot of podcasts are saying. And look, I mean, the mainstream media, as we often call it, or as people will often call it, certainly they're not helping because they are spreading a whole ton of fear. Not to say that COVID-19 isn't lethal, okay, depending upon varying factors. Not to say that it isn't. All right. But, certainly they're not helping with these situations. But a lot of podcasts that and varying, I don't know what, influencers, there's a term, varying influencers. I mean, they're all coming out saying, well, this is behind this, this is behind this, this is behind this. And they're all pretending that they have the answers. And as I was saying on the Q&A recently, I mean, there's not just one force. There's not just one factor behind this. There are a multitude of factors. When you get a situation, a problem beyond a certain scale, perhaps outside of the Dunbar number or, outside of something more local, whatever, when you get to a global scale, there are no simple reasons, no simple factors, no simple solutions. I mean, you run into, this is emergence. Things get more complex, take on different properties and so on. And certainly what people have brought up about this virus's potential to mutate. Is that higher than normal? Yes, it is. Of course, we talked about that when we did our last episode. Like I said, the episode Have a Corona. We discussed that, the potential for this to mutate into something far worse than what it is now is certainly plausible. I mean, we have information coming out of China for what they dealt with for so many weeks with its spread, and that basically finally in China, it has slowed down its spread there. Does that mean what was done in China worked and that it would work everywhere else? Well, part of that is what we're going to end up talking about here. But we do know, let's see, what is it? I want to say the percentages of lethality of COVID-19 was greater for males by about a percentage point than it is for females. 80% of people that get infected basically just deal with the symptoms for a couple weeks and then they roll on. Now, granted, if you're immunocompromised or if you're of a certain age and so on, I mean, those factors change. But there's a lot of interesting data we already have out of an area that has, I wouldn't say where coronavirus has blown by, but where its hot point, its hot zone has seemed or appears to have come and gone. That being China. So, and some people are taking those ideas to say, well, that means if 80% of people just basically, have a dry cough and headache for a little while, then everything's going to be fine. I'm not here. That's what's reported. I am not here to lay that down as that is how it's going to be by any stretch of the imagination, because the greater concern, and it's what we're going to get into, in my opinion, is how this situation is being leveraged again by multiple forces. It's being taken advantage of, leveraged by multiple forces, not just government, not just companies, not just business, not just, corporatist horseshit. There's plenty of people, plenty of factors, of forces, I think is the best term to use, that are involved in this. And so we're going to cover some of that, because some of it, a lot of it, I really, really don't like. As far as like actual solutions, in my opinion, granted, I think you can only get at solutions when you bring the scale down. I talked about that on the Q&A. Again, please feel free to, sign up for that. And those were solutions on a broader scale, and theoretical, admittedly, as to where the solutions of, how you can be prepared for this now. Well, you have plenty of people telling you how to go about that. In fact, I guess that can lead right into our foreplay here and get into our little stories, which is surprisingly Google centric. Because, well, one is that, as we know, when Trump came out with his announcement of a state of emergency, was that on the 12th? Whatever, this is a couple Fridays ago. Or not this past Friday, but the Friday previous, at the Rose Garden, he thanked Google. And, he says, oh, they're building this great website. Well, let me tell you, the link is in the show notes for this. I don't know that I'd call it a great website. It's actually pretty fucking basic. Has a lot of information of what you can do, resource to look out for to try and get the reality around this. I mean, a troubling aspect of this, an aspect that I'm not even going to get into, but shouldn't surprise anybody listening to Sovryn Tech, is that YouTube now apparently is really, really hammering down on anybody that isn't, say, well, kind of like you heard at the top of the show that was from Bloomberg Television. If you're not Bloomberg, if you're not some like major vetted, state cocksucking, news organization, you start talking about COVID-19, there's a chance your channel or your videos are going to end up getting shut down. Now, that's not a surprise. And that's, to some degree, that's also happening on other platforms. In fact, kind of a side note here that really could be a major story in itself is that Twitter is now basically labeling Anybody who is, or in fact, let me pull up the exact language on this. Well, through the magic of editing, I tried looking for the actual terms of service from Twitter, but we all know in recent years how Twitter has basically said if you engage in harmful speech, not hate speech, but harmful speech on Twitter, that your account can get shut down, tweets will get deleted, etc. Twitter has announced just recently that the definition of harm in their terms of service will include statements contradicting health authorities. So, that's disturbing as fuck, right? Basically, if you suggest anything outside of, what the World Health Organization says, your Twitter account can get shut down and it's not allowed to be on Twitter. So this idea that, and how, of course, how do they find that? Does Twitter have an army of people watching varying Twitter feeds or hashtags and things like this? I'm sure there's some amount of people that they have involved in that, but largely what they've been doing for a very long time, and they got a lot of practice with this, as well as Facebook and other social platforms in 2016, and they duped everybody into clamoring for this. And they duped the everyday person into clamoring for this. Oh shit, the Russians are controlling, our election and blah, blah, blah by various fake news and other crap on social media. That's how they did it. And so then you have people basically ordering Facebook and Twitter, or, again, clamoring, crying out for them to create algorithms that filter out the Russians. Well, guess what? Even though I think that's total crap, okay, and total boogeyman nonsense. And we've talked about that over the years. Just go back to the episodes from 2016 where we covered it. What I had said at the time was that, look, this is going to end up getting used so that the free flow of information is no longer the free flow of information and it can get controlled, right? Well, that's what's happening right now. All right. Not that I've necessarily heard anything come out from varying health authorities that seem to be, inaccurate or non-factual or a straight up lie about what's happening with COVID-19. I don't believe that I've really seen anything like that. I could be wrong. Maybe you have. Okay. But the point is that if there is, if something related to this situation that might not even necessarily be inaccurate from medical, within medical terms. Okay. But as far as, what this government's actually doing or what this company's actually doing, that can get instantly shut down algorithmically. Okay. From, somebody can just monkey pushes the button and boom, that part of the conversation is completely gone from the internet. And it does feel, let's admit it, it does feel a little more insidious when now we're being told to social distance and basically, not talk with people face to face much anymore, right? And more people are going to shopping online, talking more online, etc. Even though we were already well heading in that direction. It's not like we needed COVID-19 to really, quote unquote, help with that. But it's definitely doubled down on the matter. And kind of as something I brought up on the Q&A recently was that bothers me, because the way you can get a real gauge of reality, because I think most people recognize that the mainstream media, as it were, I hate using that term because it sounds so fucking Alex Jones, and fuck that guy. All right. But the way that most people recognize, yeah, they're blowing the shit like way out of proportions, or there's some inaccuracies in what they're saying, or, they're going for clicks, right? What's their incentives? Their incentives is to sensationalize this as serious as, this virus in and of itself is. Okay. But I think in really any situation, the only way to get to the truth is to actually talk to people. And I mean, really talk to them. And I don't mean online. Fuck talking online. Because, talking online, that's not reality. People, just all you have to do is go through Twitter to find out that, and look around. Like the way people talk online is, and we all know this, and we've known this for a long time. The way people talk online is not how they would actually talk to you in person. Okay. And I guess if you're doing a video chat, maybe that's okay. Certainly, I've had conversations with people recently where, CEOs of companies, and, when we're more or less talking face to face via video, then I get the reality of how they really feel about things. And it's, it's interesting what some of them have to say. but pretty much all of them, and these are not all these people are necessarily your Sovryn tech types. Okay. Some of them are very, salt of the earth, but they readily admit they think the media is bullshitting about, a lot of stuff. Not that COVID-19 isn't real, but just that the way the media is portraying and laying out a lot of stuff is absolute bullshit. And of course, we're going to get, like I say, we are going to get into that, about how, again, some forces of the multitude of forces taking advantage of this are taking advantage of this. So regardless, Google has put out their website. In fact, have someone messaged me. I've been trying to find this out. Because suppose there was a report. It was the weirdest little report. And the story had, practically nothing to it when you'd even bother to click on it. And that is that Sundar Pichai called Trump about a week ago and apologized to him. Okay. And this, as of this recording, which is on, I think, March 21st, 2020, he called Trump and apologized, but nobody knows what the fuck he apologized for. I'd love to hear what the hell that is. So I don't know. Is it that the website sucks or is unimpressive? Or is it maybe Trump uses Chromebooks, and because, this is also a part of, let's get into it. This is also a part of our Foreplay here. So you can check out that website, whatever. It looks like a Google website, but I'm amazed at the lack of infographics and Flash. And I don't mean like Macromedia Flash. I mean, we don't want that. Talk about spreading viruses, not the coronavirus kind, but anyway, I'm amazed at how dull it really is. I guess that's okay. It's sticking to the facts. There's no advertisements. Great. Regardless. So this was kind of surprising to me, is that the ChomeOS team, or effectively Google, came out and said that they have delayed or halted development of any future updates to Chrome or ChromeOS. There might be little updates for, I think we're up to version 80 for ChromeOS, and I think it's also version 80 for Chrome, the web browser itself. But I was kind of surprised by this, you'd think that Chrome development is something that could easily be done in our, present work from home reality. Okay. But it's not. And that, at the very least, they're saying, no, there's going to be delays. I don't know exactly what's behind that, but okay, maybe they're not worried so much about, any kind of security exploits, because right now everybody's trying to fight the virus that affects meat space instead of the digital space. I don't know. But I was really, really, really surprised by this. So regardless, something else that I thought was interesting that has actually come along, and we did talk about this, I want to say, in the last episode of Sovryn Tech. We talked about some of the updates being made too, because there was, ChromeOS 80 was a major revision. We talked about having multiple desktops and everything. I was surprised to learn, because one of the arguments against, and look, this speaks to a subject we got into in the last episode of Sovryn Tech, which was that, look, Windows, the operating system, Windows 10 just does not fucking belong in the home anymore. Now, ironically, I say that last episode, but now that everybody has to work from home, well, I guess then Windows 10 does belong in the home, because the space that I said Windows was still what's the phrase I want to use here? A necessary evil. I hate that phrase, but fine. We'll run with it. Where it is a necessary evil is in the enterprise space, right? Because there's so much legacy software and hardware that basically, without a ton of development, which becomes incredibly costly in itself, the only place where it's really needed is in that space, in the enterprise space. And now if everybody's working from home, well, I guess then unfortunately Windows ended up coming to home. But I'm kind of surprised. This is sort of a side note here on this with Chromebooks. And there's a major point I want to bring up. I'm kind of surprised that a lot of even the niche Chrome blogs or Chromebook blogs, that they are coming out and they're talking about how, well, if you need to work from home, hey, Chromebook's a great option. Now, granted, yes, they're trying to make money off of the links in the Chromebooks that they're going to recommend to you when they do that. I understand that. Okay. But I am shocked that these sites are recommending homeschooling of all things. I'll tell you, if I wanted to be that guy, and I tried to make this abundantly fucking clear in the recent Q&A I did that had a lot to do about coronavirus. I am not interested in taking advantage of the fear mongering or of the fear built up or real. Okay. Again, built up or real. There's both. All right. There's never, people get too stuck in dynamics where it's only one or two, it's either or, and they never think about the fact that there's like third possibilities or that things aren't zero sum games. I hope people get out of that mentality soon, because that's what's going to actually kill them. But regardless, so the built up fear or the very real fears, and again, both can coexist. I don't want to take advantage of any of that, but if there are silver linings to all of this, I mean, are people going to, in America, are they going to start wearing face masks en masse? You believe it or not, I don't think that's a bad thing. And it's not even about thwarting disease in my mind. It's about thwarting facial recognition tech. That's great. Fuck yeah, everybody wear a face mask. You mean it's going to be normalized to where I could walk around wearing a face mask all the time? Phenomenal. I mean, there's all kinds of things I could think that face masks would actually solve in civilization proper. But regardless, okay, I mean, there's that. But if this normalizes homeschooling, okay, or even unschooling, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different brands, a lot of different terms under that, or a lot of different styles in which you can, engage in what equates to homeschooling. If it allows for that, hey, man, right on. Like that is a win to get your kids away from the state. Fuck yeah, baby. So, there's a very real chance that there's going to be a lot of, because I know everybody's talking about, and I hate the phrasing when I see it, that we're never going back to normal. Well, first off, admittedly, what was normal was sick and sucked, right? Like that's inferring that what was normal was somehow inherently good. And I would argue no. Okay. Do we want a bunch of people dying so that we can learn how to live better, or learn how to live, closer in line with the healthy human condition? No, I don't want that at all. Okay. I take no joy in human death. I'm not interested in that in the slightest. Okay. But there is the possibility that out of this, now there's certainly, again, multiple forces moving in, taking advantage of this to increase authoritarianism, no doubt. But there is also the opportunity within this change to increase freedom. There really is. Okay. I could get into, and maybe I'll do it in an upcoming episode. I've talked about this before, where I think a lot of, especially for libertarians, a lot of concepts that are considered libertarian literally grew out of the Black Plague. And the fact that there was just tons of what would equate to, after the Black Plague, what would be called private property. There's tons of it all over the place that nobody owned and somebody had to claim, and lots of royalty, and a lot of the authoritarian infrastructure had died off. And so, the common man swooped in and suddenly ended up having 4 houses because a lot of his neighbors died or something like this. Now, I mean, there's a history to talk about there, and there are people who are already coming out and saying, well, you see, even after the Black Death, after the Black Plague, there were positive repercussions to that. In fact, you could argue that it brought on modernity as we understand it. I actually wouldn't disagree with that, but to somehow want to celebrate the fact that millions of people died in Europe, at that time, and that's what allowed for, I mean, you got to be careful when you talk about that, because you could sound like a Depop supporter, right? Depopulation. And I don't think libertarians I don't think they want to fall under that label, do they? Mm-hmm. Anyway. So there's a conversation there. I don't disagree with you. And by the way, the people who are using that verbiage are libertarian types. Let me be clear here. Okay. Well, anyway, that's another conversation for another time, and goes far beyond the breadth of us talking about Chromebooks. So anyway, if people get used to maybe being a little more entrepreneurial from home, if people, or maybe they start taking on side projects while they are not allowed to work. And I mean, hopefully they have some kind of savings. If this incentivizes people to understand that, saving is a good thing. And hey, we're all at hard times. And, believe me, I understand that as well as anybody. Okay. If there's some realizations of the fragility of civilization, the fragility of the way that humans live presently, what is the standard of living presently, not the quality of life, but even that, I guess, recognizing, because those are two different things, right? Standard of living and quality of life. The standard of living can be very, very high, but that doesn't mean that the quality of life is very, very high. It could be quite the opposite. In fact, I would argue that it is. So if this can help people realize a lot of that stuff, great. And again, if homeschooling becomes a thing, dynamite. And if suddenly you do, your kid does have to have a Chromebook or something, well, you know what? Here we go. I'm going to recommend that for all those who are now stuck at home, and maybe you have your Chromebooks, or your company gave you a Chromebook, or whoever gave you a Chromebook, and but you wouldn't mind maybe not using Chrome, because one of the problems with Chromebooks, and this is true. So like the average Chromebook today has, not all of them, but most of them have two newer capabilities, okay, that have been rolled out over the past couple of years. One is that you can install Android apps. The other is that, was it Crostini, I think is the name of the compatibility layer, or the program, if you want to call it that. Where you can run Linux apps, right? So you can run Android apps and Linux apps. Now, the funny thing is that with Android apps, that doesn't mean that you can run every Android app that is in the Play Store, because there are very specific ones that you aren't allowed to install. For example, you can't install Firefox on a Chromebook, not Firefox, the Android app. You can't install the Tor browser, say, on the, now there are alternative browsers you can install, like you can install Microsoft Edge, but only ones that are based on Chromium, right? So, but of course, Firefox and the Tor browser, which is based off of Firefox, those are not based on Chromium. So you're not allowed to install those through the Play Store. And there's really no good reason for that, other than I think basically, Google just doesn't want you to have, I mean, I'm sure there's something there, because it is a compatibility layer that's running the Android apps within ChomeOS itself. And so maybe it relies upon Chromium to some degree, but we're going to call BS in a lot of that. But I mean, maybe they can make that argument, but I think ultimately it just comes down to the fact that Google does not want you ultimately using other web browsers, or making that an attractive option on Chromebooks. Now, that said, Crostini, or the ability to use Linux apps on ChromeOS, on Chromebooks, has gone up leaps and bounds. And in fact, ChromeOS 80 has taken it very much to a next level, to the point that I think you can just install Flatpak now, and then you can install any Flatpak app right onto Chromebooks. And I think most of them, if not all of them, are supposed to work more or less, quote unquote, out of the box. Okay. But there's and I'll put a link in the show notes with the instructions on how to do this, but you can actually run the Tor browser now, full blown Tor browser for Linux on a Chromebook. Now, this is something I've been working on for a little bit, but now if you go to zomia1.com, okay, if you go to that website, or you can type in sovryntech.com, it'll take you to the same place. If you go there, there's some new tabs that are available. They've been done for a little while. Actually, you can see the dates on them, so you know that they've been up for a while. I re-added the IRC channel, which is #SovNet, right? That's there. I also put in a section or a page called recommended resources, which is basically a ton of books on all kinds of subjects, videos, documentaries, all kinds of things that if you can't find to download, there might be links available for them there, might be. Anyway, these are things that I'm continually updating and have been working on quite a bit, even though the past week's been exceptionally busy for me, because companies are freaking the fuck out, as you might understand. Well, some are freaking out. Others are like, Stallion, make sure all this stuff's working fine and we'll be all right, and they're actually not freaking out. They just, they're getting their ducks in a row a little more since they have the time and it makes their employees feel better or whatever. And that's fine with me. As I always say, the more secure we all are, the more secure we all are. Really, that has a meaning. Anyway, there's another section there that is there's practically nothing to it right now. Okay. But if you go there, it's there. I'm not going to hide it from you, but it's a work in progress. And it's called Sovryn Tech Argot. And this is basically a dictionary of sovereign tech terms. Okay. And one of the things, and this is going to get adjusted as I work on wording, but I want to get it out there. I want to have it out there and kind of available. And there's other stuff I'm going to add. But a new thing that I'm going to start doing on Sovryn Tech is discussing things via security level. And that's why I'm making a page about it so that you can reference, okay, what does the Golden Stallion mean when he says threat level 1 or threat level 2 or threat level 3 or threat level 4, right? And will there be ones beyond that? Well, maybe. And of course, when we get to like threat level 4, that gets pretty fanciful. And I admit that. Okay. But for example, threat level 1, and this is what I have on the page right now. Again, the wording will change and I'm open to suggestions and recommendations from Sovryn Tech listeners, as I always am for fucking everything, not just this. But anyway, threat level 1, protection from malicious individuals and groups, crackers or bad actors. Threat level 2, business level, enterprise space, corporate espionage. Okay. Threat level 3 is nation state threats. And then threat level 4, this is where things get kind of ridiculous, but Sovryn Tech's the show that thinks a million years ahead of time, quite literally. And so you have threat level 4, which is intergalactic isolationist security / privacy, including electromagnetic frequencies. Whoo, how about that action? So with that said, threat level. Now, if you are concerned, okay, because we're talking about using Tor to have an alternative to using Chrome, okay, on a very inexpensive computer like Chromebooks are, all right? Even though very inexpensive Chromebooks have really, really nice specs on some of them by comparison to what you could get with a Windows machine. And, ChromeOS itself, as I've often said, certainly on a threat level 1, in a threat level 1 scenario, are arguably, next to doing Linux or BSD really right, are arguably the most secure, I would say, out of the box platforms out there. In fact, I've recently come out and said that I kind of wish that Google would actually replace Android with ChromeOS from a security standpoint. Android has a lot of options because it's so open, right? And there is Chromium OS too, which I don't know if that'll become a thing. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation to get into here. Okay. But on a threat level 1, Chromebooks are great. For handling that kind of situation. But then when you get into, and even threat level 2, there's a reason schools, businesses, and so on are jumping on Chromebooks, right? Because they do offer that really great out of the box security. And especially when it comes to travel, which is a major part of threat level 2, right? Businesses, traveling, airports, all that. Now, threat level 3, that's where Chromebooks kind of fall apart. Okay. Now, maybe if, it's a country outside of the country you happen to live in, then that maybe Google plays nice with your laws. But on a nation state level, Google themselves, right? Even in the Tor browser on a Chromebook, they probably, my guess is that ChromeOS probably has some kind of keylogger to it. Overall, I just can't imagine why they wouldn't. Really, why they would pass up on even for what could be considered, though I'd argue there's no such thing, but what could be considered benign, helpful purposes. Okay. I can't imagine why they wouldn't put a keylogger in ChromeOS. Now, let's be clear here. Windows has a fucking keylogger in it too. In fact, that one we more or less know exists, or at least it has been implemented at times in the past, right? So on a threat level 3, a nation state actor, using the Tor browser, okay, in that scenario, probably not going to necessarily help you out if you are ended up targeted, say by a nation state. But as I have said often, if you, the individual, you, whatever the fuck your name is specifically targeted by a nation state, you are fucked, Chromebook or otherwise. Okay? And as we talk about more things in this episode, maybe you'll get more of that picture as far as, your privacy goes, being fucked. Okay. If you're being watched, you're being watched. There's ways to live in the cracks, but man, if you're targeted, So regardless, I say this, using the Tor browser, especially when it comes to threat level 1 or threat level 2, not a bad, it's a totally valid thing, I think, to rock. Especially if you log in a guest mode, and I think you can still use Crostini in guest mode on a Chromebook. I mean, that's a fairly secure platform to be rocking the Tor browser on. Now, granted, it'd be great if you're just running Tails, right? Of course, I am very supportive of Tails. I think in the last episode, I might have recommended checking out version 4.0, or actually we're up to 4.1.2, I think. But regardless, yeah, that's a great way to go. But very simple to install and start using the Tor browser and not have to use ChromeOS on a fucking Chromebook, on a very secure operating system as far as threat level 1 and threat level 2, dynamite. So yeah, Tor browser, there you go. And I've been rocking it and using it quite a bit. And you could save bookmarks and everything. And basically, you could almost treat it as, Tails is basically Tor OS, but you could turn a Chromebook into very much, a Tor platform, more or less. Again, I made it abundantly clear. You're probably not going to be protected from threat level 3 on that. Okay. But, for the everyday going around, which I know a lot of my listeners are, I mean, you're not everyday people. Obviously you're a cut above, but you get my point. All right. You're not going to extremes. And there's nothing wrong with being extremes. Like the old saying goes, only the paranoid survive. You're damn right. But I think that this is a very, very interesting option as far as that goes. Anyway, let's, okay. Well, we got into everything I had listed off in the foreplay here. Something quick before we get into our main story that I think is a very worthwhile thing to discuss, and presents what I think is a proposed solution that really isn't a solution. Just something a little fun to talk about. So I know a lot of people have been asking, hey, where's TIE Fighter Renegades? Don't worry, folks. Rob and we are absolute brothers, man. And you got to understand, like, we are going to have more TIE Fighter Renegades for you. We are still, digging us some Star Wars, and I don't mean to speak for myself or, pat myself on the back or anything like that, but I know we are two of the best talkers when it comes to Star Wars. Actually, I think Rob's one of the best talkers when it comes to just about anything. But regardless, we will have new episodes of TIE Fighter Renegades coming out soon. Just, schedules make things tough. And certainly this whole scenario with COVID-19 has not helped matters as far as our schedules getting lightened in any way. But regardless, I do want to recommend, I want to bring this up quick, something just a little fun in between all the doom and gloom here. I have very much enjoyed, even though I don't like some of the answers that it has given for what happened in the movie. Rob and I basically reviewed episode 9 of Star Wars, Rise of Skywalker on TIE Fighter Renegades over 2 episodes. We kept, because we'd see it again and we keep talking about it. Of course, the movie did end up getting released early, supposedly because of COVID-19. That's nonsense. Basically, all of these movies coming out early is because theaters are getting shut down everywhere. So there's no second or third third rung. Okay. Like there's, theaters that run at a discount where you can see movies that have been in theaters for, a couple months already or something like that. There's no money to be made by having the movies in theaters right now. So they're just releasing them early. Don't let anybody fucking kid you that somehow Hollywood's like, oh, we know you're stuck at home. Here, have a movie. Aren't we so kind? Go shit yourself. Oh, I fucking hate Hollywood. Hate it. Anyway, I had already vowed to not go to movies anymore anyway, to not go to theaters anymore anyway. That was long before COVID-19 was a gleam in a Chinese eye. And that's no offense to the Chinese at all. but I'm just saying, long before I had said earlier this year, I said, it's like, look, I'm done. I'm just done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to pay for their shit. Had enough. Anyway, but yeah, Rise of Skywalker ended up coming out early. The book, the novelization, did not come out early. That would have been nice. But I have been listening to the novelization, and I'm just going to say this here quick in case you were, because I know I had some people asking the Sovereign Tech Telegram group, Stallion, have you been reading the Rise of Skywalker novelization, which is an expanded edition? There's a lot more in the book than is in the movie. And they're saying, what do you think of it? Like, I'm kind of, holding off to hear more about it, whether or not it's worthwhile for me to get. Well, I'll tell you this. I think it's absolutely worthwhile to get. In fact, I think that going into the future, I think the real way to experience, the movies, the sequel trilogy is a bunch of pretty pictures, no doubt. And they are very pretty pictures. But the way to actually experience those stories and those characters and everything that's going on, I think you get far more out of reading The Force Awakens, reading The Last Jedi Expanded Edition, reading The Rise of Skywalker Expanded Edition, and they actually end up being fairly good, fairly logical, stories in comparison to the just the clusterfuck that the movies are. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. We'll talk about it in an upcoming TIE Fighter Renegades, but I do just want to say that, yeah, I totally recommend the novelization of Rise of Skywalker. There's things in it, like what they talk about with the Emperor and how he's back and all this stuff. There's answers that I think are bullshit and no point to them. But regardless of that, the stories make way more sense as books than they do as movies. And I think that's really going to be the way to experience those stories, into the future. So yeah, I definitely recommend that. In fact, also, this is interesting. Just a little bit of gaming news in between here. Something I'm really excited about. And because, with Star Wars, part of what I liked about the novelization of Rise of Skywalker is they spent a lot more time with the, Sith Eternal or Final Order characters to get where they're coming from. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating because with Star Wars, I'm a fan of the dark side, overall, in the abstract on there. Again, I'm notorious. In fact, I should add this to the Sovereign Tech Argot page. I'm notorious for saying, there are no computers. There are only TIE Fighter boxes. Everything else is worthless. Basically meaning if it can play TIE Fighter, okay, fine, it's worthwhile. But everything else is extra software. TIE Fighter is all that really matters. Of course, TIE Fighter I consider to be the greatest game ever made. And downright lifestyle, for fuck's sake. But anyway, actually another game that I really love. And as far as like Star Wars games, it is definitely, I think it's safe for me to call it my second favorite Star Wars video game of all time. And that is Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. That's the full title. It's technically would that be the fourth entry in the Dark Forces series? Or you could call it Jedi Knight 3, either one. But yeah, Jedi Academy, tremendous game. Easy enough to get it right now and play it on PC. But I'm a Nintendo guy, and supposedly on March 26th, which is coming up fast, on March 26th, there's going to be a Nintendo Direct. They haven't announced it officially, but supposedly there's going to be one. And rumor has it that Jedi Academy is going to get released digitally on all consoles on that day, including the Switch. On the PlayStation blog, I think it was on the PlayStation blog it got announced, and so people are basically expecting, they haven't announced it for the Switch yet, but that's because it's going to be part of the upcoming Nintendo Direct, which I think when Jedi Knight 2 came out on Switch, that was on, I want to say that was in the September Nintendo Direct when they announced some of the other games coming to Switch Online. But anyway, if that comes out on Switch, damn. I know what I'm doing for a night, baby. At least. The game just, the lightsaber combat in that was so fluid, so stunning. But not only that, it's a game where, kind of like Knights of the Old Republic, where you got to choose and the storyline would change. And would it change? You got to choose to be the bad guy. You got to choose to turn evil in the game. And man, I remember playing it on the original Xbox. That would have been like 2004, 2005. and just I couldn't stop playing that game. It was so brilliant. Yeah, easily my second favorite. I mean, well, I guess not easily because it's a toss up between that and Knights of the Old Republic, but that'll be awesome. So if that is more widely available than just on PC, which I already own it through GOG and everything, but I can't recommend this enough. So a couple of great things. You can go grab the Rise of Skywalker novelization, which I really enjoyed for a lot of reasons. And also you can get your hands on, hopefully on March 26th on just about every platform, you can get your hands on Jedi Academy, which I think is very worthwhile. So anyway, that said, you know what, let's get in a quick sponsor read as well before we break this up, before we get into our main story here. And for I know they've been talking about COVID-19 quite a bit, and you've been getting some very interesting info and some deep dives into the true nature of a lot of aspects of things. For example, I know that they called bullshit on the supposed toilet paper shortage that came out of COVID-19. Of course, it's not really a shortage. People just panic bought, just like, people think that, oh, there's a shortage of food. No, there's fucking plenty of food. And you ask businesses, they will tell you that there's plenty of food. Okay. That's not a problem. Right. But because people are panic buying, it looks like that there's a shortage, but that's not the reality of the situation. Free Talk Live did great coverage on toilet paper. and I mean, look, that was a hot topic. Okay. It might sound ridiculous, but hey, anyway, and for the record, I just want to point this out because I've said this on Sovryn Tech many times, years ago, in fact, that gold will mean nothing when there is a really high level disaster or scenario or problem going on. Something along the lines of the perception, certainly, of COVID-19, is that gold won't mean shit. You are going to want to get your hands on, not that gold's a bad thing. I'm just saying it won't mean as much, I should say. Despite what people will tell you, it won't mean as much as toilet paper. Now, there's no reason you can't have both. Okay, get yourself some gold and toilet paper, but you better consider that toilet paper, right? Anyway, but Free Talk Live did great coverage on that. And of course, if you want to listen to the show, go to freetalklive.com. Of course, they talk about all kinds of things. And there have been some very interesting conversations around this whole situation with COVID-19 on the show. So go to freetalklive.com. It runs 7 nights a week, 3 hours a night. Man, nothing will stop that show. It does it right. In fact, that's one of the beautiful things about podcasting and radio and a lot of this other stuff is that it is, in many ways, it's not disaster proof, but it's disaster resistant. Sovryn Tech keeps on rolling. Free Talk Live keeps on rolling. And I am honored to have Free Talk Live supporting this show. And I certainly appreciate what Free Talk Live is doing out there today. So freetalklive.com, check them out. And of course, call in and talk about whatever you want to talk about. Go for it. freetalklive.com. And we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Now, let's get into our main story for this week. And this is something you might think this is unrelated. I would argue that it's not, because I think it is a matter of time before people, I think it's already, the conversation's already happening, but where I wouldn't be surprised if varying news sources started to bring this up, or varying influencers or whatever would start to bring this up. Now, it's funny because this is a conversation I've wanted to have on the show for a little over a month now, because basically two stories, well, one's not exactly a story, but it became a story, coincided. And after the fact, going into what has gone on with COVID-19 and the reaction to it, it's actually far more interesting to talk about it now than it would have been before the reaction to COVID-19 has occurred. So what I had initially saved to talk about was a tweet that got a lot of reaction. And, folks, all kinds of people make all kinds of tweets every day, and even really, really famous people. And frankly, after about 5 minutes, they are largely forgotten, and if they trend, then maybe they're remembered for a day, at best. And then they're completely forgotten. And, everybody goes back to thinking that person is whatever, hunky dory, fine and dandy. But this was a tweet made by a guy who I actually have some respect for, that being Richard Dawkins. Of course, the God delusion, so on. I think just about everybody knows Richard Dawkins, certainly one of the most famous atheists the world has known in recent years. In fact, he even came up with the Dawkins scale, which we use on this show as well, could probably be added to the Sovryn Tech Argot. The Dawkins scale is a number between 1 and 7, which basically gauges how much of an atheist are you, right? 7 being, absolutely, I know for a fact there is no God. And 1 being, yeah, of course there is, and he controls everything, I guess. So anyway, Richard Dawkins, very famous, and a scientist of, for what makes for a scientist in modern civilization of the highest degree. He made a tweet on February 16th, this year, 2020, that got some reaction. And the tweet goes something like this. This is exactly it, actually. And of course, it's linked in the show notes. It's one thing, this is Richard Dawkins, quote, "It's one thing to deplore eugenics on ideological, political, moral grounds. It's quite another to conclude that it wouldn't work in practice. Of course it would. It works for cows, horses, pigs, dogs, and roses. Why on earth wouldn't it work for humans? Facts ignore ideology." Now, that's the tweet that he made. You're saying, what does this have to do with COVID-19? Hold on to your hats, okay? I'm wearing one. I'm holding on to mine. No. Now, people freaked out and basically said, holy shit, Richard Dawkins is supporting eugenics. That Nazi. No. Okay. There is the problem with a tweet. And I think a lot of times certain celebrities or influencers are well aware that they could say things that could be construed or taken a lot of ways and generate a lot of heat, but they do that on purpose. They want the heat, right? In wrestling, they call it cheap heat. It's where you drum up something to just get attention around something, whether you mean it or not. And this is a situation where, I don't know, maybe for whatever reason that he bothered to say it, I'm not sure. Because it doesn't have to do with the story that I want to talk about, because the story I want to talk about is actually from a year ago, almost to the day. It's from April 2019. But Richard Dawkins, everybody starts saying, holy shit, he thinks that eugenics is a great thing, blah, 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 blah. Again, a tweet does not allow itself or does not lend itself to a lot of understanding. It doesn't lend itself to allowing you to extrapolate generally. Now, he did tweet underneath that, and I want to read those, kind of in a thread here. I do want to read those. And well, let's do that. Here we go. Quote, this is after that tweet. "For those determined to miss the point, I deplore the idea of eugenic policy. I simply said deploring it doesn't mean it wouldn't work. Just as we breed cows to yield more milk, we could breed humans to run faster or jump higher. But heaven forbid that we should do it." And then he follows up with that. "Eugenic policy would be bad. I'm combating the illogical step from, quote, X would be bad, end quote, to X, so X is impossible, end quote. It would work in the same sense as it works for cows. Let's fight it on moral grounds. Deny obvious scientific facts and we lose, or at best, derail the argument." So basically what he's saying is that he's not, or what he's trying to clarify is that he's not arguing for eugenics. He's just saying that in a raw, just look at the facts, just look at the raw science. Eugenics would probably work for humans. Now, to talk about this tweet itself, of course, I think he's wrong. I don't, because I think that there are a lot, just as I think that eugenics probably isn't working as well for the cows as we would like. It's working well for the humans that milk the cows, right? But is it working well for the cow? That's where he's not, that's the part that he's not considering. And does that come into a sense of morality? Certainly it gets into an ethical realm. I won't deny that. But to flat out say that these things work for these creatures, yes, it works for all of these different species that he listed off as it relates to us, but that does not mean that it works for us. And that is where I would disagree with Richard Dawkins, in that, okay, wait a minute, but, would changing us, allowing us to jump higher or do these other things, would that actually make the human condition in any way better? I mean, this isn't even getting into, we could go into Star Trek, territory and talk about the eugenics wars, right? Or, talk about Khan, like, and where Spock says superior ability breeds superior ambition, and so on. I mean, it's easy, the example of Khan, and again, science fiction allows us to explore ideas in a fairly realistic realm, if it's harder science fiction, in a fairly realistic realm to explore, how these things would work, what could go wrong, right? That's a beautiful thing that science fiction does. So it's worthwhile to explore what science fiction has to say about some of these things, even though it's not reality, right? That's what we call, on Sovryn Tech, we call it the science fiction method. It's a way for us to deal with changes that could be coming or that we consider. So when it comes to Khan, the idea is, like what Spock says about superior ability breeding superior ambition. That's not really like a way of knocking, humanity using eugenics. Okay. Because what's wrong with being more ambitious, right? What's wrong with having more abilities? Nothing in and of themselves. Okay. But the issue is that if it's not something that you actually worked towards, you don't fully appreciate what you have. And that's where this superior ability that just suddenly comes out, can basically, can breed, for lack of a better term, what Spock would have called a superior ambition, but really that's the totally wrong term for it. So this gets into, well, here, actually, I'll give you an analogy. Okay. And a lot of people have brought this up, and I am saying this from a certain degree of experience. Okay. For example, so I am a veteran of the U.S. Army. I was involved in invading Iraq. And I say invasion. Now, a big thing that came out of the Iraq War, was how America had given Iraqis democracy, and this was somehow inherently better for them. Okay. Now, this is in no way, and I hope that is abundantly clear, because I am an anarchist. Okay. So obviously I don't support any government, regardless of its style or, ocracy, whatever it happens to be. Dictatorship, democracy, whatever. I don't care for any of them. I think they're all failures, and ultimately harm humanity abroad. But a point that gets brought up often, okay, especially by people who, are critics of the Iraq War, and then there's more than one reason to criticize the Iraq War. But they will say that, forcing democracy upon the Iraqi people was bad policy, because the Iraqi people basically didn't know what to do with it. And now, you have so many people. I mean, this is getting into very hotbed political topics, but now you run into where, well, this is why Iraq is basically dealing with Iran all the time, because at least Iran, has a political system that has had some kind of consistency for some decades. And, the Iraqi government basically doesn't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this runs into all kinds of, issues. And it culminates with a lot of people saying, well, basically the Iraqi people, as evil a bastard as Saddam Hussein was, and I don't mind saying that either, as evil as he was, maybe they had it a little bit better under him or something like that. I mean, and people really do say that. Okay. And being in Iraq myself, I have some understanding of what they are saying. Okay. Basically, if you don't earn, whatever democracy or freedom, if you want to use that term, even though I would argue democracy is not freedom, but if you don't earn your freedom, you don't really appreciate and understand what it took and what to do with it, what it took to get it and what to do with it. And that's where I think some of these issues with eugenics kind of comes from, is that a lot of our abilities just overall, a lot of our abilities come from hard-earned evolutionary obstacles and forces, to the point that we do, or as long as we pay attention. I mean, now the problem that we're running into in modernity is that we don't pay attention to our bodies or our environment anymore. I'm not talking about environmentalism. I'm talking about paying attention to what is going on around you. That is all. That's what I mean by environment. What is around you? It is not environmentalism. Okay? We don't pay attention to these things anymore. We don't pay attention to our own bodies anymore. So we can't even really take advantage of what our ancestors had basically hard won, not in wars, okay, but what had hard won through living, through evolving over hundreds of thousands of years. To jumpstart people with wildly new abilities in cultures, civilizations, society, families, because we are social creatures, so pick your social structure of choice, is an absolute upending. And what happens in that upending is it is a big, big question mark of whether or not it comes out as a positive or a negative. It is a serious rolling of the dice, that to say we have the intelligence to know to handle that's some serious hubris on people's parts, including Richard Dawkins, on a lot of scientists' parts. Now, what does all of this have to do with COVID-19? Well, here we go. Okay. And in fact, I have another story, like I said, that I want to get into, and it's going to play off of the point, but I want to get to the point for you here. What this has to do with COVID-19 is that I am just waiting. In fact, the Chinese government might be the first for people to come out and clamor, just like they clamored for the algorithms that basically shut down dissenting opinions. And there's nothing wrong with dissenting opinions. The algorithms that shut down dissenting opinions on the internet overall, the people that cried for that, I could imagine, I really could picture people start to say, what if we could just make humans where these kinds of viruses no longer affect us? And that idea scares the hell out of me. Most people in general because, as far as viruses go, all right, let's take a minute to talk about viruses. I know people, and in the past few episodes of Sovryn Tech, we've had some pretty high level, dare I say, conversations around what is alive and what isn't. We talked about, is the internet actually a living organism now? Are these space, fungi houses that NASA's proposing? Is the fungi, are mycelia a living organism? Or are they sapient? Not just living, but is it a sapient organism? We've been getting into big conversations like that over the past few episodes. Okay. Now, a debate in the scientific realm that often comes up is, are viruses, are they alive? Are they like a sentient creature, or are they just, a virus, right? Just another type of life in the animal kingdom. Are they even alive? Again, the terms get crazy and the debates get even crazier. Bottom line is that a virus is basically a simple thing that requires hosts to live. And that's usually where the debate kind of ends for the people who say that, that they're not, alive, as it were, because it needs something else to live off of, right? It has to have somewhat of a parasitic relationship that in and of itself, it's not alive, or it's not sentient. And I get that. Okay. And I probably fall more in that category. So viruses, a lot of people are asking, hey, why didn't SARS, take off the way that COVID-19 has? Why didn't that become such a major pandemic? Well, the reason that is because SARS basically killed people off too quickly. to where it couldn't spread it couldn't spread quickly enough. Okay. Like it would kill the host before it could spread fast, or, before it could spread. It didn't have enough time. As to where COVID-19 is keeping the host. In fact, again, most people live right through the infection with no problem, or at least according to the data we've gotten from China is that 80% of people, they just go on about their lives after the fact. Okay. But because COVID-19 doesn't like kill everybody off, yes, the virus can spread more so. Now on planet Earth, as far as viruses go, there are around 1.5 million viruses, different virus types on Earth. Okay. About 1.5 million. Now, about half of those, more or less, give or take, about half of those can infect or have the potential, at least, either can directly or have the potential to infect human beings. Okay, so that's how many viruses we're dealing with. Anywhere on the order of 600,000 to 800,000. Okay, that could potentially infect us, or that do so. Why aren't all these viruses just killing all of us? Well, here's the thing. Either, we're not engaged in an action that allows the virus to enter us, or to jump species to be able to enter us, which is like what SARS, COVID-19 did. Or we do have such and so many viruses, but they don't have a negative effect. Okay. And this is a major part of my concern around looking at eugenics for trying to resolve COVID-19. Now we're already looking into vaccines and all this, and okay, vaccines are what they are. Not getting into that conversation. But I could imagine that people might start, because of the way that this has disrupted people's lives, okay, regardless of what's behind that disruption. I could start to imagine that. Really the one thing that I think would actually get people to finally clamor for some kind of eugenics and some kind of like genetic solution to this, if somehow COVID-19 shut down Netflix, I bet people would say, line me up on the CRISPR device and just hook me up. That's all it would take. Because people are so pathetic. But sorry, boy, that sounds kind of, you don't want to talk like that here. Jeez. Anyway, keep in mind too, it wasn't but barely 100 years ago. The eugenics movement didn't start with the Nazis. It started in America. There's great work by Edwin Black. He has an entire book about it. In fact, I think they just had an expanded edition of that come out. And I know that's actually on the recommended resources page, as much of Edwin Black's work is, on Zomi1.com or Sovereigntech.com. I know you can go there and I have those books listed off that talk about it. But that's originally an American movement. It was seen as downright patriotic. And for that to come back 100 years later, ouch. But seriously, I could imagine that there are people who are entertaining this idea. Okay. And I don't know if this even inspired Richard Dawkins' tweet. I really don't know what inspired his tweet. That's kind of a weird thing to just say out of nowhere, unless he just wanted to make the news cycle or something. But bottom line being is that just as there's so many parts of being a human being that we don't understand, right? That we don't understand about the human condition, the hard problem of consciousness, right? We don't understand how consciousness works. What really is the role of the brain in comparison to consciousness and identity and self-awareness? These are big questions that don't have, you can have your theories, but that don't have what are considered to be factual answers, right? And so I would argue that with all the viruses that surround us or infect us, again, not all of them are negative. I don't think that we exactly understand their role in how we live on this spaceship Earth. We are only just beginning in the past decade to really understand how our gut bacteria does far more than digestion. Our gut bacteria controls much of how we of how we think, our attitude, and our general health, and so much more. We didn't know that until barely a decade ago. And we're still learning so much about how gut bacteria affects us. What about, viruses that are effectively positive? So if we start fucking around, we start putzing around, okay, with the human genome to try and defend us from viruses, I have very real concerns around that. And in fact, actually, people who were key in identifying and working on, say, actual solutions for COVID-19. There isn't just one, but, as far as like solutions, even they will admit, hey, we can't just like say, okay, how are we going to handle viruses in general? Whoa. We don't know how all these viruses, again, in the hundreds of thousands that are relative to humans alone, how they affect us as a species. And, it doesn't all have to be negative. I could get into multiple cases where actually there have been, and this isn't arguing for people dying. I don't want anybody dying. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying here, but this isn't anything new either. I've talked about this before on Sovryn Tech, where populations have developed immunities, like entire populations on the planet Earth have developed immunities to one disease, to one virus, because they got, their ancestors tens of thousands of years previous got, wiped through with another virus. Not related at all, but it actually, building the immunity to that helped them build an immunity to another in the future. Right? So again, the effects of viruses for humanity to pretend that we have some kind of understanding of what this all means and that, well, we've got to stop this now or we've got to take this dramatic step or something like that could actually end up fucking us in the future. And I think that that's a very, again, making a vaccine for COVID-19 and all that stuff. Okay. And wanting to, getting people to wash their hands more or, a lot of these other very, very, some complex, some simple solutions to all of this. There's certainly solutions that I don't agree with, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Fine. Okay. But let's not go so far as to think that somehow, we can play God about this. That's a very careful conversation. It's one that we're going to expand upon in the future. Now, the story I was actually going to bring up, again, that was from a year ago. I'll hit it here. And this is from Vox, and it's scientists added human brain genes to monkeys. Yes, it's as scary as it sounds. Some are calling the Chinese experiment an ethical nightmare. Now, there's other things I want to get into in relation to COVID-19. I'm going to leave this article in the show notes, and I want to revisit this conversation, okay, because this has much broader ramifications. But this is the kind of toying around that, well, you could say, well, all kinds of things are dangerous and risky that are actually very good things to try and do. Sure. But then there's plenty of things we don't need to do. Like what is the, and I guess part of what I'm concerned here with this, when I first read this, I was like, holy shit, this is Planet of the Apes. Like the Chinese government probably wants to literally create chimpanzee soldiers or something. Anyway, I could imagine that there are people who would argue, in fact, it might even be in the story. There are people who would argue that, well, if we could make chimps, if we could, kind of like David Brin's Uplift series, if we could uplift them a bit to where they're closer to humanity and then use them to, experiment on to try and solve varying human diseases, man. Anyway, I'm going to save this part of the story, but I wanted to touch on the eugenics aspect. Okay. And and scientists clearly, if you read this story, I'll leave the link in the show notes, but we're going to revisit it. Scientists clearly, say, wow, like this isn't like, well, like it said at the headline, this is an ethical nightmare. What they're engaging in. And I would argue that doing it with humans as well absolutely would be. Do I believe Dawkins thinks that eugenics is bad policy and that we should argue against it from moral grounds? I could kind of believe that he'd be intrigued to experiment on humans in that way. And certainly it's such a big conversation. I mean, we could spend the whole episode on it, but I want to revisit it. But there's important things that I want to discuss right now that's going on. Okay. With COVID-19 that I want to get to. So yeah, this is a big problem. I'm going to leave this. We will revisit it in the next episode, but now we'll take a break. We'll come back for HackSec, and there's something I want to discuss there. We'll be right back with more. Hey, if you have a project that needs reliable cryptocurrency data, check out blocktap.io. Blocktap.io is a universal cryptocurrency API. You can get historical prices for Bitcoin and other digital assets that you can use to build charts and do market analysis. Blockchain data is also indexed, so you can get transaction statistics, address balances, and more for Bitcoin and other networks. Blocktap.io is free for personal use, and you don't even need to create an account to access the API. To get started, try some of the example queries on the homepage at blocktap.io. Again, that's blocktap.io, blocktap.io, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Woo, let's get back to the show.
HackSec.
Now, something else I'm going to save for the next episode of Sovryn Tech, which is going to come out in pretty rapid succession here. It's the data collection and a very real call by politicians against encryption is happening because of COVID-19. I want to deep dive on that, but we're going to do that in the next episode. What I want to talk about right now is drones, or our drones, right? I should say our drones. Well, no, the subject I can use is, anyway, yeehaw for grammar. In California, which often is a trailblazer, and I say that with no respect, is a trailblazer when it comes to legislation. All right. Like I said, no respect for that. In California, the governor of California, initially with the recommendations coming down from after, the slapnuts in chief, President Trump, when he came out and said, we are in a national state of emergency, and those are big words, right? That's what he said. A lot of the states started to take varying actions, and California's initial action was they were recommending shutdowns of anything non-essential, but it was being handled originally by the governor of California. He basically told counties, okay, you handle it. You decide on what works for you. And if I were someone that actually believed in politics, yeah, any problem you want handled at the local level, because they're going to know best locally how it can be handled, right? The further on high an order comes from, the less understanding and success it has at a local level, right? Because everywhere is different. Everybody's different, and of course that's why really everything should be to the individual level, because that's where it makes the most sense and we have the best understanding of how things work for people. That's one of the main reasons politics doesn't work, but regardless of that. So the call for it to be done at a county level, okay, for what that is, I mean, fuck politics, but for what that is, all right. But then he came out recently in the past few days, the governor of California, and said, well, at the county level, not enough stuff is getting shut down. So I am taking this at the state level, and I am going to say everybody's going to be shelter in place. You're going to or whatever, you need to stay at home. Now, to help enforce this, again, other than non-essentials, and I mean, California is in such a situation, apparently. Some of the numbers that have come out of California that they're saying within a fairly short period of time, they're expecting 25 million people to be infected if they don't take these, really dramatic steps. That number is kind of hard to believe. With the speed at which I want to say it was like a matter of months or not even. That was very strange. Anyway, regardless of where that number came from, and people have already asked for the math on that. Like, wait, how did you come up with that number? I mean, they have basically, like floating barges of hospitals literally floating into ports, to help handle whatever, what's going on there with COVID-19, or what's perceived to be going on there with COVID-19 in any case. But he is now taking, state level action, not county level anymore, like he initially did. And, he told everybody stay at home unless it's, essential. We don't have to talk about GameStop here. The boy, we could. Those idiots. Anyway, and to help enforce this, the state of California, and this was reported by the Financial Times, and I want to give credit to a Sovereign Tech listener that actually helped free this information because it was behind a paywall. And good on you. Information likes to be free, folks. So, and it'll do what it takes to get there. But the story from Financial Times was California police to use drones to patrol coronavirus lockdown. Chula Vista to mount loudspeakers and night vision cameras on new drones. Now, the headline, that's the subheader. Just the headline is enough, I think, to get people to freak out, and understandably so. But we need to bring some reality to the situation here, or some more understanding, some more information into the scenario. And I'll read it here quickly. A police department in California plans to use drones equipped with loudspeakers and cameras to enforce a coronavirus lockdown. Chula Vista police bought two $11,000 drones made by the Chinese company DJI, doubling the size of its small fleet, and plans to rig them up with speakers and night vision cameras. Quote, "We have not traditionally mounted speakers to our drones, but if we need to cover a large area to get an announcement out, or if there were a crowd somewhere that needed to disperse, we could do it without getting police officers involved," end quote, said Vern Saley, one of the city's police captains. Quote, "The outbreak has changed my view of expanding the program as rapidly as I can," end quote. He added, "Never let a good crisis go to waste," right? The immortal words of Rahm Emanuel. Now, rightfully so, like I said, people are freaking out about this. Now, initially, I mean, my first thought was, I just see the headline and I'm like, whoa, like, what are the drones going to do? Like, are these like predator drones? Are they going to basically like shoot to kill? If somebody won't stay in their house, like what does this mean? But as you explore further, of course, you find out that these are drones that basically have very high-end cameras on them, night vision cameras and loudspeakers for some degree of crowd control, spying, certainly, and some degree of crowd control. Now, as you heard at the top of the show, China did this very, very thing. In fact, these drones are coming from China, but the Chinese government ordered this. Also, Spain is doing this as well. In fact, the story is from March 17th, 2020 that I have here from Digital Trends. Spanish cops deploy speaker drones to enforce coronavirus lockdown. So this is not just something happening in California. This is something being used all over the world. And now you can say that, well, okay, they're drones, just to see what's happening. Are people, I mean, it's scary in that they are expecting riots over this. I mean, like I said, really, I think the only thing that's really going to get people to riot outside of maybe some rowdy college students would be, in fact, these would be included in what I'm about to say, would, like I said earlier in the show, if you shut down Netflix, yeah, people would probably start rioting in the streets, and they'd have the baseball bats and and whatever, tearing down the barbed wire and all this stuff. I mean, if they can't watch television, holy fuck, the world is over, right? No, that's not right. But I mean, that is how most people think. So, I'm bothered that, and part of what's concerning with that is that, okay, if they are expecting riots, they are expecting to enact varying orders and legislation, perhaps, that they think people aren't going to take too kindly to. And so that's concerning in and of itself. And will it happen in other countries? Well, to some degree in China, it did, where people were literally like, their doors were basically nailed shut. It was complete quarantine. You can't even go out for food. And is that going to end up being the situation here? the real problem here is that this is normalizing more surveillance. Okay. Now, the use of drones within the United States by the authorities has always been something on very shaky ground. And it's something that has been a slow creep of increasingly being used. Now, of course, the argument here is that, well, look, we're just putting on nicer cameras. Of course, you know, put the parentheses here, see Gorgon stare, right? Go to Wikipedia, look up Gorgon stare and get worried about that. But whatever. Anyway, so we're putting on some cameras and loudspeakers. So basically, you know, we're going to yell at people if we need to, blah, blah, blah. Like that actually is going to do anything. This is the latest in a very slow progression, like I said, of drones. I mean, and we talked about a few years ago on Sovryn Tech, where drones, you know, the arguments for drones ended up getting used because somebody was stealing cattle and cows and where that would go. And it's like, oh, okay, well, they started it by trying to stop thieves. And now the technology of drones being used with, you know, very high end cameras on them and everything and night vision and all this. Now it's going to get normalized for some degree of crowd control, or, you know, whether it's to just look at them and see what's going on or to be able to tell the police where they need to be. This is just more of that slow creep. And this is not okay. All right. Spying on people, keeping an eye on people, this falls under where government again is a horrible idea in and of itself, and there is never an ethical argument for its existence. Okay. But this falls under where governments truly fall apart, even if you're somehow somebody that believes in them. And that is when you start to legislate against stupidity. You can't legislate against stupidity. It never works. Nothing. There is no, what's the old, in fact, Harlan would say it. I think Asimov would even say it, but the old Harlan Ellison quotes, the two most common elements in the universe are hydrogen and stupidity. Stupidity is one of, if not the most powerful force in the universe. You know, I mean, it's neck and neck with love, I think, in gravity. You can't beat stupidity. You can mitigate its effects upon you, but it feels like a universal force. How the fuck seriously, if you are the kind of person, okay? If you are the kind of person, because you really are legislating against a human thrust, right? If you would you legislate against love? Aren't the kind of people that listen to this show or people in general, isn't this like the hot thing today to, you know, well, yeah, gay marriage is fine, you know, and whatever. And people are trying to decriminalize various laws that stand against love. I mean, we've been engaging in that for the past 100 years, right? I mean, it used to be that like a white woman couldn't ride in a car with a black man. Because what was that? That was legislating against love, right? Who would argue for that? I hope nobody today. I hope. Well, when you are legislating against stupidity, it's based in the abstract sense, it's the same goddamn thing. You are trying to legislate. I mean, something that is just, you know, it's a part of who we are. You can't legislate against something so abstract. But that's kind of besides the point. In Rome, you know, you fucking need to hear the political analogy, because being an anarchist is just not enough for you to say no to the use of surveillance by authoritarian bodies, or, you know, to the use of surveillance in any way, because we're fucking human beings and privacy is part of our biological makeup. Well, I guess until the eugenicists get their hands on us. If that's not enough, let me tell you about a little empire called Rome. This empire also ran into very drastic threats. It wasn't a virus, though I'm sure they had their share. Okay, it wasn't a virus. No, it was barbarians at the gates. And the Roman Senate at the time, who tried to represent the people, said, well, you know what? We must declare emergency powers. And we have to let Caesar go handle these fucking barbarians. Caesar handled those barbarians. And then he handled the Roman people. To the point that the rest of the world finally said, all right, that's enough of these fucking Roman assholes. They're going down. And then the Visigoths come over the hill. As you hand over more and more power, you don't get it back. The more you give to a centralized authority, the more the individual loses. This is a fact. It happened in Rome. If you keep letting this kind of stuff happen here, and I'm not saying take any political action, I am saying just raise your fucking voice and say this is absolutely goddamned unacceptable. At the very least, educate people. That's really the only way you can stop this, if you can even stop it. Or you can create technologies that hopefully would, bring these drones to the ground without harming anybody. The argument for emergency powers, and I don't care what the hell the scenario is ludicrous. Because if you give governments, authoritarian structures, any excuse to get more power, they will either wait patiently for when something that fits into the definition of the excuse comes along, and then they'll take it, or they'll fucking create the excuse. All wag the dog style or whatever, and then, or false flag or take your pick, and then they'll take that power. If you ever give them the excuse, you cannot give authoritarian structures, governments, corporatism, whatever, you cannot give them any excuse to trample upon what makes you an individual. You cannot give them any excuse. Okay? Because the instant you do, you are opening Pandora's box, and it's only a matter of time. It's not if, it's when. And I get the arguments, I really do. I get the arguments that people are like, well, but in the world that I live in, when my house is burning down, I expect the fire department to come here. I understand. I know what you're saying. And yes, in the world we live in, there are times where absolutely you call the police. If you have somebody who's invading your home or whatever, and you've got to do what you've got to do. I understand that. Okay. And I kind of get those arguments, but things on those are very individual levels where you can go case by case. The problem here is that the reaction to COVID-19 is not playing ball case by case. It is saying there is one solution for everybody. And that's just not true, especially at this scale. Okay. Look, in a town that you live in with like for the firefighter example, most towns operate under a volunteer fire department, right? It's completely volunteer by people that live in the town itself, because they've all come together and agreed, oh, God damn it, someone's got to do this if one of our houses burns down. So what the hell? There's no handing over of power as far as that goes. It's just individuals coming together. That's basically a union of egoists. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. But this is not the case. I feel no safer with Google making a website for me. I feel no safer with drones overhead from COVID-19. The only way I feel safer is by hopefully educating people. Hey, it's a good idea for you to finally wash your goddamn hands after you wipe your ass or after you do whatever the hell else, and stop being a shithead. Those kinds of things that I feel safer about. When I see a drone overhead, no matter what's going on, no matter what disease, no matter how lethal, whatever, I do not feel in any way more safer. I do not see it as part of the solution, because I'm an educated goddamn individual that has an understanding of how this shit works and where it can go and where it has gone in other countries before, or where it inherently needs to lead to, because it's just the nature of power over structures. Okay. But I also know just how confident I feel, how much better I feel when I see empty soap dispensers. I would rather see empty soap dispensers than see drones over my head with night vision and loudspeakers. There's no good argument for this. There just isn't. What, crowd control? If you've got crowds going on, you're doing something wrong. Like, you've clearly pushed it's authoritarianism pushing too far if that sort of thing happens. This doesn't even make sense. And yes, then they'll just, by very, people that I trust in the space, of studying viruses and pandemics and things like this. Basically they all say the same thing, that, well, you know what, this is something that's going to end up happening every 3 years. It's just the nature of having a globally connected society. And I get that. And I actually don't disagree with that. I think that this is kind of order of the day. This sort of thing does happen. So then that literally means if you agree with that, and that is a metric, okay, that is a statistic that governments have regurgitated, okay? Of course they have, because it allows them to keep their emergency powers, right? Boy, just look at Chancellor Palpatine go. Anyway, if everybody buys into that, then these drones are going to be up there forever. Well, then I guess they're right. We are never going back to normal. We are going to be constantly surveilled. And I would argue that it will eventually come to the point where those drones will be armed. Because, you don't want to endanger police, to go into an infected area, right? Or a high infection area, a hot zone. I didn't get into this with the eugenics argument, and it's a point that I wanted to bring up, and it's a point I actually talked about in the Telegram group. Most of the solutions that I'm seeing on the table are all about just, in some form or fashion, bolstering authoritarianism. In fact, something that I think is a hop, skip, and a jump away from both topics that we've brought up in this show. I want to wrap things up here. Maybe not eugenics exactly, but like the idea of technology being used to solve what is effectively, really a biological problem. I could imagine where people, and like especially Silicon Valley, would really be on, I could see them saying, hey, we have this idea that we're really hot on. It's called transhumanism. I know you think I'm going out left field, but whatever, we're running with it. It's called transhumanism. And, guess what? None of these viruses could actually kill us if we were all just uploaded brains and robot bodies. Wouldn't that be all right? And I've actually already seen blogs from transhumanist organizations that are suggesting this. They're already putting this out there, that this just shows why we need right now. We got to push transhumanism, because that will stop all of this cold. Even that. Okay. And look, one, what you could call a technological solution, certainly, that I'm supportive of is, let's get our asses to space. Let's be a multiplanetary species. That way, what could affect one, hopefully doesn't affect the other on some other planetary body, great. Okay. That's one I am totally on board with. But transhumanism, this idea that somehow this is like the way to do it. And there is, conversations around, well, because of all the data that we could collect, we can keep an eye on this sort of thing. And like that gets implemented into the transhumanist argument, and kind of gets into sort of, actually, I mentioned David Brin earlier, but like David Brin's Transparent Society, right? Where not less surveillance, but more surveillance on everyone. Oh. Anyway, so this argument for transhumanism that's going around as well, which I think every concern I brought up around eugenics can also be brought against transhumanism. It's in many ways, it's really just another form of it. And I know I have people who are very supportive of transhumanism in my listenership, and you know where I come from, and believe me, I know where you come from. And I mean, there's a way that I guess transhumanism can be done right if everything's open source. But since when did tech companies not try to patent the fuck or have control the fuck over everything? And that really kind of gets at the problem there. And I'll put it very succinctly, and I'll put it this way. I would rather take my chances in relation to scenarios like COVID-19. I'd rather take my chances with vitamin C than visual C. What I mean by that is I'll take the risk and just do all the things that I know makes, the human body healthy, than risk very flawed code and design that is readily apparent in Silicon Valley with trying to solve this thing. Or not just Silicon Valley, or, the Chinese government and their technological solutions, or, drones and whatever. I will take my chances with vitamin C before I'll take my chances with visual C when it comes to my fucking life. It's ridiculous. And that's what I mean. I don't like, even transhumanists are taking advantage of this situation to try and push their agenda. I wish to push no agenda. I mean, if I have an agenda, it's individualism and individual choice. And, maximum amount of choice. And this whole situation is being taken advantage of by multiple forces. Like I said, multiple forces, even the transhumanists, to push their agendas. And their agendas ultimately end, in my opinion, in control and not more freedom. And, kind of reminded of Braveheart, right? What will you do without freedom? Like, are you even living if you're not free? And whatever happened to the old New Hampshire saying, right? Live free or die. Well, I'm going to wrap it up at that. No, the surveillance, this argument for, viruses to bolster the surveillance state, outrageous. There's no ethical argument for that. There just isn't. Wanting to engage in, kind of rampant eugenics or even transhumanism or something like that because of this sort of thing happening, I highly debate that, because you don't know what's going to, you could end up making the situation worse when it comes to eugenic solutions. And as far as transhumanism goes, I think I'll get if you want a conspiracy, I'll give you one. I think Silicon Valley is hot on transhumanism because they know that, they must hate Silicon Valley and governments. They absolutely must hate the fact that they can't read our minds yet. They must hate that because that's such precious data. They hate that they can't tell us when to sleep, that they can't tell us when to do this and that. And they take every opportunity they can to try. And I think transhumanism would just basically give them control to the code to make us do whatever. Fuck that. So anyway, there. You want me to go out on a limb for a little bit? I went out on a limb. Take your chances with vitamin C, not visual C, friends. And stay safe out there. Wash your fucking hands. Okay? And I think I'll wrap this one up. So of course, if you want more content, more of me for some reason in these trying times, go to zomia1.com, get your hookup there, or sovryntech.com. You can type in either one and it'll take you to the same place. And more episodes to come out very soon. I will see all of you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovryn Tech, an Osiris One production. Now go out there and make some trouble.